Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of RPG Radio. My name is Winback and on today's episode we're taking a look at our Vindicator build in the Elite difficulty. We've just hit level 75 within the most recent couple of levels, and there are some pretty big power spikes at this level in terms of gear. We're going to talk about a couple of those pieces of gear, as well as what it means to finish your devotion tree using both Ultos, the Shepherd of Storms, and your Spear of the Heavens. Both of these are going to be lightning-focused devotions, and they are going to funnel a ton of damage into your kit. So we'll talk about getting up to those, talk about the cool gear that I just mentioned, and basically talk about what it means to play this build in Elite, because we are going to have to make some changes to the melee aspect of this build, switching over to ranged, because the survivability just isn't there in melee, sadly. Now, with all that out of the way, let's talk about the range change first, because this is going to be a bit of shell shock for anybody who's gotten used to the melee and playing that dive in, dive out type of character. The good news is that you can still mostly do that when it comes to playing this ranged build, but the ranged variation is going to do a lot more kiting, and there should be a lot more upfront damage mitigation in your movement and getting away from enemies, rather than relying on bursting them all down immediately and healing up any damage that they do to you. The worst part for me of using the melee build was when enemies would die and they would leave a whole lot of damage after. So your poison kamikaze beetles or your Chthonian harbingers, when those guys die, they deal a whole bunch of damage to you and you lose very big chunks of health over time. If you'd used all of your mobility, including your dodge or your teleport in this case, you don't have a way to avoid that and you can't really prepare to deal with it. At least when you're using a ranged build, you can distance yourself from them, use a lot of the CC that comes along with playing this build, and keep the distance good enough that you don't get hit by these really telegraphed death spells that will do ridiculous amounts of damage to you. Since we don't have really what is a panic button in this build, that is tough. So you have to play really defensively on the front end to avoid getting blown up on the back end, because this class, even if it is melee, is very squishy. So that is tough to deal with. Now, if you're going to switch over to the ranged variation of this build, the first thing that you're going to want to do is put as many points as possible into Storm Spread. Storm Spread is on the Inquisitor side of things, and this is an ability that will activate off of your basic attacks. So while you are firing off with your ranged weapons, you will have a chance to basically shotgun a whole bunch of lightning damage in a pretty medium-sized range, and it'll be doing piercing and electrocute damage as well. This is also going to scale up with your weapon damage, but it's only about 38%, and given that ranged weapons, even though they are one-handed, even the two-handed variations are going to be less typically than your melee weapons. So it's not going to increase to any extraordinary level like your two-handed weapons will, but the better gear that you get, the more damage will go up for Storm Spread. That's typically how anything that scales off of weapon damage is going to work, so just remember to keep an eye out for the best possible gear in that one-handed ranged slot. Once you get this bad boy to level 10, you'll be activating it on about a 22% chance, so every, I'd say right in between 4 and 5 attacks, you'll be launching a Storm Spread salvo. That is, again, a very big AoE of lightning, piercing, and electrocute damage, so this fits incredibly well with our kit. The other really good thing about switching to ranged and using Storm Spread is that your Shaman ability in Savagery, and more importantly your Tenacity of the Boar, is going to activate incredibly consistently, because you can do a lot of auto attacking with range on your side rather than having to go into the middle of a big group just to hit a couple guys and stack this guy up. I know it was a little bit counterintuitive before, but when there is really no survivability on the line, this is just right at home with your ranged auto attacks. I think I've made my case with the change from melee to range though, so we're going to let that sit and you can think about it however you want to if you decide to play this build. If you want to stick with the melee and you want to change it up from here, feel free. This is the change that I had to make this build at least get us through Elite, because as much damage as it does, this is definitely one of those builds that will pop at the slightest inconvenience. So you got to take your wins where you can get them. But let's move on to the devotions. Now, in our last video, we made it up to Tempest, and we left things there. Tempest, being a really strong devotion for any lightning build, was a great place to stop it. But there have been quite a few additions to the devotion tree, and that is going to take up a lot of our time in this video. That being said, once we have Tempest completed, there are a lot of really easy devotions to get through that will get us all the way to the Spear of Heavens and the Shepherd of Storms. We're also going to pick up some Giant's Blood along the way, because Behemoth is an incredibly good devotion for keeping any squishy class alive, especially those who maybe decided to stick with the melee aspect of the build that we were going with. Now, in order to get to those outer constellations, we're going to need to start somewhere, and that is going to be easiest to do with the Tsunami devotion. Because getting up to Spear the Heavens requires 20 primordial affinity, which are your blue points, Tsunami takes a big chunk out of that while giving you some lightning buffs and a really good passive ability that will activate off of your Wind Devils. The Wind Devils themselves will actually fire off the Tsunami damage, which is cold, lightning, frostburn, along with scaling from your weapon damage. So, that being said, Tsunami is going to give you bonuses to lightning and cold damage, but you're also getting buffs to your physique and your spirit, along with some defensive ability. The activatable, like I mentioned, is only on a 1-second cooldown, and when you have your Wind Devils going, they themselves will be the ones to fire off the Tsunami at a 35% chance. Since we're basically keeping the Wind Devils up all the time, they are going to be launching all of this damage in a big AoE very, 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 very consistently. You'll see it a lot throughout the video, but all of this put together amounts to a lot of really good AoE clear, and that is never something to frown about. After you're done with Tsunami, you can pivot on over to Behemoth, and in this case, if you really need the survivability before you want the damage from Tsunami, you can start on Behemoth. You can take the path less traveled if you prefer and go the defensive route. The only reason we took to Tsunami first is because that is more damage, whereas Behemoth is more survivability. Giant's Blood is the ability that you get from Behemoth, and this is a 15% chance when you are hit, which you will affix to your Stormcaller's Pact or your Mogdrogan's Pact, whichever, because they are always activated. Now, when the Giant's Blood goes off, you will get a 12-second duration of 590 health regen per second, along with a flat 1200 health restored immediately, and 20% of your maximum health on top of that 1200. So basically, you have a 15% chance when you get hit to get a ton of health back. And when that happens, things are looking pretty easy, because that health regen per second is going to make it very, very easy to recover from any big damage that gets dealt. At least on a 25-second cooldown, it will. But the rest that you're getting from Behemoth is a lot more health regen. You're getting flat health, and if you decide to pick up any pets along the way from gear when you're playing this build, he does have some bonuses for the pets as well, including increased armor, increased health regen, and increased maximum health. Behemoth is really a dream devotion for staying alive, and I would 100% recommend it for any build that has trouble doing that sort of thing, unless of course you're able to go complete 100% glass cannon, never get hit by anything, and completely eviscerate entire rooms worth of enemies within a fraction of a second, because really that's all the time that it takes sometimes to get hit. With our Behemoth devotion nice and tucked in right where it belongs in the center of our kit, we're going to move on to one of our first Outer Rim devotions, and that is the Altos, Shepherd of the Storms. This devotion is going to dump a lot into our lightning damage again, because that's what we're all about with this build, and it is going to have an activatable ability that will only activate on critical attack. So the next video is going to be focused a lot on getting our offensive ability up so we can crit very often with this build, but for the time being, having this ability go off is going to do quite a bit for us. It's going to chain to up to 10 targets. It is on a 1.5 second cooldown. It scales with weapon damage at 20%. You are going to get flat lightning electrocute damage on top of all of that stuff, and you have a chance to stun the target for a little under half a second. With all of that on this ability, you're also going to shred a target's elemental resistances for 3 seconds, which is, again, lightning being one of the elemental damage types, means 20% more damage from your abilities because we're reducing those resistances on any monster that may have stacked them up. It is incredibly useful, and this is, at the end of the day, where you're going to want to equip your Storm Box of Elgaloth as a devotion ability. So you'll put that on Altos, the Shepherd of Storms, and then as soon as you cast this thing, once you hit your crit with the Storm Box, you are going to start flinging out even more chain lightning effects. That is on top of the incredibly short cooldown that Stormbox is on, so you will have a lot of opportunities to crit, you'll have a lot of opportunities to activate the Hand of Altos, which is the ability of this devotion, and you're basically just going to tear through entire rooms of enemies, bouncing lightning off of everyone so often that your typical dark, dank dungeon is going to be lit up like the surface of the sun. There will be so much lightning bouncing back and forth from every corner of every room. Zeus himself will be jealous and wonder if maybe you're one of his illegitimate children, because holy cow, there is no way that much lightning belongs in such a tiny little space. Now, as for everything else that Altos will do for you, you'll start off by getting buffs to cold damage along with some offensive ability. You'll get lightning damage buffs after that with even more offensive ability. After that, you'll be picking up crit damage, frostburn, and electrocute, all buffs in a big way with even more offensive ability. You're going to be getting health in the flat amount of 350 and 15% chaos resistance, and then after all of that is done, you're getting base lightning damage increase from 10 to 30. You're getting a bigger buff to cold and lightning damage of 100%, and then after all of that, you'll land on the Hand of Altos, which is your backup chain lightning passive that will activate off of the Storm Box. All in all, this devotion is extremely powerful for any lightning-based build and really shouldn't be overlooked because the affinity that you need to get in there, the prerequisites for building up to it, are pretty cheap, and the payoff is incredibly big for anybody interested in a lightning or even an elemental-focused build. After we complete Altos, though, we are going to have to get back onto that 20 primordial affinity train, and there are quite a few devotions to get through before we can get to the Spirit of the Heavens. The really interesting fact of this devotion is that specifically in this build, you will need every single devotion point in order to get it. Your 55 will end on the ability that comes with Spear of the Heavens. So keep that in the back of your mind. You're going to have to get all of them to activate this, but it is well worth the journey. The next two devotions that you're going to want to pick up, you can do in any order, but they are both requirements in order to get to Spear of the Heavens. The first is going to be your Lizard. Lizard is going to give you health regen, and increase to healing abilities, which is your Word of Renewal. You're also going to get movement speed and Constitution. Constitution is the health that you recover when you are out of combat, your yellow health basically. It's really easy, 3 points, and it gets you 4 primordial affinity, so it is incredibly cheap for what you're getting out of it. After that, you can pick up Sailor's Guide, which is going to give you defensive ability, physique. You're going to get slow resistance and a reduction to freeze duration, and that's about 18%. You're also going to get physical resistance, which is that ultimate tier stat that is very hard to come by, and elemental resistance. So anything that gives you resistances in your devotion chart is already doing wonders for you. And it's also going to end on some movement speed with some more physique. These two, once you're done, the Lizard and the Sailor's Guide, you can finally make your way over to the Spear of the Heaven. Now, Spear's ability is called the same. It's the Spear of the Heavens, and this activates on a 50% chance when you are hit. But the really great thing about it is that it is very, very easy to activate. That 50% chance is basically every second time that you are attacked, you will drop a Spear of the Heavens down on a target in a pretty close range. This ability will also activate in a 24-meter radius, so that is a huge area around your character, and it scales off of your weapon damage while doing lightning, aether, and electrocute damage and stunning the target that it lands on for 1 second. So anything with an aura that can damage you, anything that has a carpet or a persistent damage over time effect, has an opportunity every 2 hits to basically get hit back by the Spear of the Heavens. You can see it a lot in this video, dropping all over the place. For being what is essentially a defensive option, this ability is just going to be dealing wicked amounts of damage all the time, because it is incredibly easy to get hit, but you're not really going to get hit for a lot of damage in every scenario. So basically, it's just going to drop from the sky enough that you'll be increasing your DPS by a pretty considerable amount just for getting hit and interacting with other enemies. After the ability though, the Spear of Heavens is going to start off by buffing your lightning damage and giving you some offensive ability, then continuing on to buff your Aether damage, which is not really the best thing in the world. Aether and cold damage are going to be kind of your backup damage types in this build, but neither of them will be built very heavily into. At the Aether damage devotion point though, you're going to get offensive ability. At the 3rd devotion point spent in Spear of the Heavens, you're actually going to get a 5% maximum offensive ability increase, which is disgusting because 5%, the higher number that you have for offensive ability, this devotion point of just 5% is going to increase your chance to crit quite a bit. At that tier, you're also getting Aether resistance at 15%, which is incredibly important for the late game and those late game scenarios. After that, you're picking up flat Aether damage, you're getting buffs to crit damage just like Altos, and increases to energy regen. The final tier before you pick up the ability for Spear of the Heavens is going to be lightning damage and Aether damage increased by another 100%, and your maximum lightning resistance is going to go up by 3%, buffing the cap for your lightning resistance by quite a bit. So once you start getting into Nemesis farming, the Ethereal Nemesis, specifically Valdoran the Storm Scourge, will be incredibly easy, I think, with this build to take out. So once you get there, if you want to start farming any Nemesis boss at all, Valdoran should be very easy because you'll be able to get a lot of infamy farmed up really quick with the Ethereals, and this build should be very good at burning his health down really quick while resisting a lot of his damage. So keep that in the back of your head once we get this bad boy to ultimate, and maybe you'll see him make some cameos in the next video. That'll be it for the entire devotion tree though, so make sure that you have been keeping track of those, or head over to the Grim Tools link if you need them all laid out in one big picture for you. They are all there. Remember, all 55 points are required, so until you max out 55 devotion shrines, which is possible in Elite, you cannot finish the devotion tree. That said, let's look at some gear now, because there is a bit that you can get a hold of in Elite of the legendary variety. There is a relic that we are going to pick up of the Ascendant or Transcendent variety that will also be buffing our damage, and cap it all off with a couple monster infrequents that should be easy enough to find because of the way that monster infrequent farming works these days. So let's start off with the easily craftable stuff. The Bane relic is going to be the one that we pick up. Now, I know you're probably thinking, why don't you have an Eye of the Storm? Well, the only reason for that is because Eye of the Storm requires Manticore Eyes for its recipe, and I couldn't farm up enough Manticore Eyes before this video went out to get it. So, Bane is an incredibly good backup. Remember that you want Eye of the Storm once we get into Ultimate, but Bane, what it is doing is giving you elemental damage, offensive ability, energy regen, attack and casting speed, and you will get 1 to all skills in Inquisitor. Because we just picked up that Storm Spread, because we have Storm Box, Word of Pain, and you basically get it, the whole build. That +1 to all skills in Inquisitor is going to be incredibly useful. You'll also get the skill, which is a 33% chance on critical attack. So this will happen in 1 of 3 of your crits, but you'll get a bolt of pure elemental energies to knock back advancing foes. Coming straight off of the tooltip, it is on a 1.3 second skill recharge, activates in a 1 meter radius, and does a whole bunch of elemental damage. You're also going to convert 5% of that damage into health, so this can heal you basically 1 out of 3 crits, and the completion bonus for the one that I got gave me another point into Stormbox of Elgaloth, which is just fantastic. Really just cherry on top of everything that I want. Incidentally, we are wasting the fire damage that it's giving us, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because a lot of the other stats that come with Bane are very, very good. And since it's achievable at level 60, you can actually farm this one out before you can even access a lot of the gear that you'll have as well. Once you're done with your relic farming, you're going to want to keep an eye out for things like legendaries. After your relic is done, there is a set piece that I think is going to work really well with this build, even if it does have some wasted points. But that's going to be the Lights Defender set. Lights Defender is a legendary set of 4 pieces with a helmet, a chest piece, shoulders, and gloves. All of that out of the way, it is no weapons, so nothing is going to take over your ranged weapon slot or your offhand slot, which is incredible. And once this is done, you're going to have a big chunk of, it's a 10% max health increase, 55 offensive ability, and then a +3 to Storm Totem. You're also going to get another ability, which is a summon, just like Storm Totem, that will be giving you some extra damage in the lightning and electrocute department. Sets are really nice in Grim Dawn because once you get to Ultimate, they really give you a power spike to farm to after you hit level 100. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Lights Defender is going to be pretty useful for this build, and farming up to it shouldn't be terribly difficult. When you only have 2 pieces of this done, you're getting 5% increases on your defensive ability, and it's also buffing out your energy regen on top of that. So really nothing to shake a stick at this point. As far as your monster infrequents go, we're going to lightning run these because I do want to get them all on the screen for anybody who can't, click on a link. But we've got the Oroprax's Sting that I mentioned in one of the previous videos. We've got the Wendigo Eye for our metal. Oroprax's Sting is your amulet. And then we're also going to pick up the Solar Girdle, which is something that you are going to get a recipe for to to craft at your blacksmith. This is going to give you +1 to all skills in Shaman, and you're going to get the Lightning Bolt ability on a 10% chance to attack. Don't forget your Yeti horn as well. Right after Act 3 is finished, you'll find this along the Asterkarn Road from the Yetis, but that is going to decrease the skill cooldown of Wind Devil, increase the summon limit, and add 24% crit damage to the Storm Box of Elgaloth. All of that is your monster infrequent checklist, so pull up the Grim Tools right now, find out where you need to farm those specifically if you don't have them, because those guys are going to make life in Elite a whole lot easier. They all give you points where you want them, they all do all of the necessary changing to the abilities that you have to increase their potency by quite a bit, and all things considered, it's not like you have to do a whole lot of farming to get a hold of them. You pick up any of these that drop on the ground with decent stats, and you can make a pretty decent chunk of damage happen, even in Elite. Once we get up to Ultimate, we're going to refarm them one more time for their mythical versions, but basically, nothing is difficult when it comes to farming monster infrequents except putting in the time. That being said, that is all that we have for this video, so thank you again for hanging out. Come back next time, we'll get you that ultimate finish to this build, and I will see you all there. Peace out.